The envelope was already on the table when I stepped into the glass-walled conference room. No handshake, no greeting. Just that sterile white rectangle with my name, Valerie Hart, typed too perfectly, like it had been proofread by legal. Effective immediately, Dennis said without lifting his eyes from the tablet. Your title has been revised to Strategic Liaison. Compensation adjusted accordingly. That was it. No acknowledgement, no gratitude, no mention of the contract I had just signed. Only a title I'd never heard before, and a 55% salary cut. I said nothing, not because I was stunned, but because a chill had already settled in my spine. My name is Valerie Hart. I'm 45 years old. And until 10 minutes ago, I was the Senior Director of Aviation Partnerships at Northwind Aerotech here in Seattle. Just last week, I closed the largest deal in the company's history, a $1.25 billion order for 5 transoceanic jets with a German engineering consortium. 8 brutal months of early flights, late calls, tangled translations, and policy red tape. I carried that deal on my back, alone. I should have been honored. Instead, I sat across from a man who couldn't even say my name out loud. 20 minutes earlier, I'd been outside this very room, prepping slides on post-deal implementation. That's when the door opened. A young woman, Erin, maybe 30, stepped out. Energetic, smiling like the company already belonged to her. I remembered training her during her internship 2 years ago. Behind her came Dennis, laughing. They shook hands like co-founders. Neither noticed me standing down the hall. And now I was holding a termination letter dated the day before. They didn't just take my role, they erased me. Quietly, efficiently. 1 day early. I folded the letter and placed it in my leather bag. I didn't speak. Not then. Because that wasn't the moment to fight. That was the moment to memorize everything. Every glance, every dismissal, every name. They thought it was over for me. But the ink on their mistake wasn't even dry. My nameplate? Gone. Not replaced, not broken, just missing, like I'd never existed. If you're ready to follow the rest of this journey and discover what happens when quiet resilience becomes unstoppable power, subscribe to the channel and stay with me for the next chapter. I stood there for a long moment, uncertain whether to knock or grieve. That office, my office, was no longer mine. The lights were on, but the soul of it felt different. An intern passed behind me, juggling 2 coffee trays, and paused. Need help finding something? She asked, kindly, without a hint of recognition. I offered a small, practiced smile. No, I said. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Then I turned. Gripping the cardboard box HR had so thoughtfully labeled Valerie's personal items, I made my way toward the elevators. Down 5 floors. Past departments I hadn't walked through since my early associate days. Procurement, compliance, even the training center. That's where I found my new office. A cubicle. Windowless. No phone. Just 4 carpeted walls. A flickering fluorescent bulb overhead. And a desk drawer filled with a knotted-up charging cable and someone's forgotten tea bag. It smelled faintly of toner and stale lemon cleaner. No nameplate, no welcome. Just a yellow post-it stuck to the monitor. Valerie, I'll set you up by EOD. Ken. I sat in the brittle plastic chair and looked around. Across from me, pinned to the wall, was the freshly laminated company org chart. I walked over slowly, half hoping to find my name somewhere. A trace, a footnote. But it wasn't there. Erin Blake had taken my place, Director of Global Strategy Initiatives. Below her name, the caption read, "A bold new vision for Northwind's global future." I closed my eyes. The tight ache behind my ribs wasn't fury. It was grief. Grief for the version of me that had given everything to this company. I hadn't just been replaced. I had been erased. Later that afternoon, a junior assistant from marketing dropped by, arms full of presentation folders. These are for tomorrow's leadership update. Can you make sure they get to Erin? I nodded without a word. As she walked away, I noticed a corner of one folder sticking out. A slide deck titled, Contract Finalization, Berlin Team, Lead, Valerie Hart. My photo was still there, smiling, glass of champagne in hand. But now? Someone had taken a red marker and drawn a thick X through my face. A thick, red X. The slide had been reprinted with Erin's name and corporate headshot in the final version. I returned to my cubicle and opened the file cabinet beneath the desk. I sifted through the rows of binders, the same ones I'd spent years compiling, labeled, aligned, color-coded by phase, region, and review date. But now, something was wrong. Each tab that once read VH, my initials, had been overwritten with EB. Valerie Hart had vanished. Erin Blake had taken her place, her messy handwriting scribbled over contracts I had written in exhaustion, across airports and hospital beds. I closed the drawer gently and sat there, unmoving. I didn't cry. I didn't get angry. I simply listened to the silence wrap around me. What stung the most wasn't the stolen office, or the title, or even the public credit. It was how effortless the erasure had been. And that's when I understood something sharp and final. They never planned to keep me. Not really. I hadn't slept properly in 8 months. I counted. From the first compliance memo sent at 3:14 a.m. to the final 11:59 p.m. call with Berlin, I had carried that $1.25 billion deal across time zones, continents, and breakdowns, alone. Now, sitting in a half-lit cubicle with someone else's initials on my binders, I asked myself how they had forgotten so fast. But they hadn't. They never truly saw me to begin with. I'd reviewed engine specs on the hotel floor in Frankfurt, jet-lagged and blurry-eyed. I'd taken calls from Zurich while hooked to an IV blazer draped over a hospital gown. And I'll never forget the December night. 2 days before Christmas, when I sat alone in a SeaTac cafe, watching my mom's FaceTime ring out. I missed our dinner for the first time in 17 years. She said she understood. But I still saw it in her eyes. I gave Northwind Aerotech everything, my time, my health, my identity. And when Polaris Dynamics, our direct competitor, offered me a position 3 months ago to head their global strategy division, I turned it down. I'm loyal to Northwind, I told them. They offered equity. I said no. I closed the door to my office and went back to finalizing the contract. My contract. Clause 47B wasn't standard. It wasn't from legal. It was mine. It hadn't come from legal. Clause 47B was never in the original draft. It happened over dinner in Berlin. The client's COO leaned in, mid-meal, his tone low and certain. We've been burned before. We need guarantees. Then he said it outright. If you're not leading the implementation, the deal doesn't happen. So I added the clause myself, quietly, without mentioning it to Dennis or Erin. I wrote it in plain English. Operational oversight shall remain under Valerie Hart. In the event of reassignment, client reserves the right to void the agreement. They signed. We toasted with champagne that night. And now, that one sentence, tucked quietly between 2 generic subclauses, had become my last line of defense. Hidden in plain sight. Ignored by people too proud to imagine I might be irreplaceable. I leaned back in my creaky chair, fists clenched under the desk. Not from anger. From clarity. They believed they'd stolen the deal from me, but I had never surrendered it. That's the thing about betrayal. It echoes backward. Sitting in that dull gray cubicle, staring at Erin Blake's name on contracts I'd poured myself into, I kept coming back to one moment. The one time I'd felt truly seen. And it hadn't happened at Northwind. It was in Munich, during the final stretch of negotiations. Tensions were high. Legal teams arguing over cross-border liability. Engineers tossing in last-minute specification changes. The board growing impatient. The deal was unraveling, thread by invisible thread, and I was the one holding it all together. That Friday night, the client's CEO, Mikhail Berengar, sent me a message. Dinner, just us. No agenda. 7:30 abends, Schumannstraße. I hesitated. There were still unresolved clauses. But something about the invitation felt deeper than business. When I arrived at the understated, wood-paneled restaurant just off the Bavarian State Opera, he was already seated. No aides, no laptops, just a glass of red and a folded napkin. I wanted to speak off record, he said, not as executives, as people I let him talk. He told me how their last billion-dollar aerospace contract had imploded when the lead negotiator was suddenly replaced. It cost them years and credibility. Then he looked me in the eye. "We're not signing with Northwind," he said. "We're signing with you. If you disappear, so does the deal." In that moment, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Not validation, not metrics, trust. Honest, human trust. I gave Mikhail a quiet nod and promised him I'd see it through. Start to finish. No gaps. That night, when I returned to my hotel room, I found a handwritten envelope slipped under the door. Inside was a simple note, written in elegant cursive, to the one who earned our confidence through action. Not title. We don't forget those who carry weight with grace. Monsieur Berengar. I kept that letter tucked in my planner, hidden behind business cards and boarding passes. No one at Northwind ever saw it. They wouldn't have cared. But now, surrounded by silence and someone else's initials stamped across my work, I opened that letter again. The paper was creased, but intact. My name might have been erased from every org chart, but they couldn't erase that night in Munich. The next morning, I showed up at 8 a.m., sharp. Just like always. No one expected it. After stripping my title, slashing my salary, and handing my legacy to someone else, they probably assumed I'd vanish. Quietly. Or leave in a dramatic blaze. But I came back. Hair pulled tight, blazer buttoned, eyes ahead, and no one, absolutely no one, knew what to do with me. Erin passed my cubicle once that morning. She didn't speak, just gave a hesitant glance, unsure whether to smirk or avoid eye contact. I gave her nothing. No warmth, no resentment, just calm. Across the hall, Dennis's door was half open. He hadn't said a word to me since the demotion. Not even a courtesy debrief. I caught his reflection in the glass. He looked right at me, and then away. I didn't follow him. I didn't speak up or demand an explanation. Instead, I opened my email. Not to apply for jobs, not to draft a goodbye. I started writing blueprints. Quietly, intentionally. I reached out to people who mattered. Colleagues I had once crossed oceans with. Engineers who stayed late because I did. Procurement leads who hit deadlines because I asked. Even 2 former Northwind execs now quietly running divisions at competitor firms. I didn't beg for favors. I simply asked the right questions. Soft questions. Strategic questions. The kind that didn't scream desperation, just curiosity. If someone with deep aerospace compliance experience became available next quarter, would that interest you? Do you still lead post-deal integration? How's the morale on your international team lately? I wasn't planting seeds. I was testing the soil. That Thursday, during my lunch break, my phone buzzed with a call from a number I didn't recognize. Area code 202, Washington, D.C. Valerie Hart? The voice was calm, polished, professional. Yes, I replied, already locking my screen. My name is Allison Kerr. I am an independent contract attorney. I just completed a review of the Northwind Valera jet agreement. I sat up straight. She continued without pause. I believe you authored Clause 47B? I did, I said carefully. There was a beat of silence. Then, it's airtight. Precise language, direct intent, fully enforceable in any international jurisdiction. She added, They have no idea what you gave them. I exhaled, slowly. Something between validation and vindication settled over me. They're blind, she continued. That clause was the smartest safeguard in the entire agreement, and they stepped right over it. That night, I stayed late. Not to work. Just to observe. Aaron left early. Dennis never emerged from his corner office. I sat alone in that cubicle, dimly lit by my aging monitor, one hand resting on the drawer where the original contract lived, still bearing my ink, still marked with my initials. I didn't say a word. I sent no signal. Because power, when you truly hold it, doesn't shout. It waits, silently, steadily, until it's needed. And they had no idea I still held it. I didn't go to France. Erin did. She strutted through the Dulles executive terminal Monday morning like someone who'd paid her dues. First-class boarding pass. New Northwind-issued briefcase, the exact model I once ordered for global executive travel. I heard she smiled the whole way through boarding. I didn't wish her luck. I didn't even blink, because I knew something she didn't. Valera's global headquarters sat in Toulouse, a marble and glass fortress I knew like muscle memory. I'd been there 3 times. I knew which espresso was worth drinking, which elevator took an extra 5 seconds to close. And I knew how the CEO's assistant liked her documents formatted. Clean layout, 12-point serif font, color-coded tabs. I'd made a note of it after our second meeting. By the time Erin arrived at 10:12 a.m., she'd already sent a check-in selfie to someone in HR. Grinning, confident, clueless. What she didn't realize, what none of them realized, was that my name wasn't just printed on the signature page. It was written into the bones of the deal. The fallout hit Northwind's headquarters like a thunderclap. At exactly 4:30 p.m., a formal email landed from Valera's legal department. It was brief, cold, surgical. Per Clause 47B, this contract is contingent upon post-deal transition being led by Ms. Valerie Hart. We do not recognize substitutes. All further meetings are suspended. Everyone was CC'd. Erin, legal, procurement, even the board. There was no fluff, no gray area. And just like that, the $1.25 billion jet handover was without a leader. Because I wasn't in France. And no one had invited me. I learned about the email from a junior analyst who passed by my cubicle, his eyes wide with disbelief. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The silence was deafening. Whispers echoed through break rooms. Elevator rides stretched awkwardly long. Slack threads disguised as check-ins popped up like weeds. No one said my name, but I didn't need them to. The story leaked anyway. Someone in the comms department tried spinning it into a pivot piece, shifting priorities, leadership agility. But within an hour, the draft was yanked offline. Rumor had it Dennis personally ordered the thread deleted. No announcements, no internal memos, no mention of France. But it didn't matter. I didn't need to fly to Toulouse. I didn't need to make a scene. I just had to wait. And I did. By 7:45 p.m., I was still at my desk, sipping cold coffee and watching panic roll into my inbox. Subject lines like client delay, clause 47B, urgent. Did you author this clause? None were addressed to me directly. But my presence was in every line. Erin didn't stop by the next morning. Dennis didn't call. But someone said she cried in the executive bathroom. Maybe that part was true. Maybe it wasn't. I didn't care. maybe it wasn't true. I didn't care, because I had done nothing but be remembered, and they had done everything to be forgotten. Now? They were locked out of a contract I no longer had to defend. By 9 a.m. the next day, the executive floor was vibrating with tension. You could hear it through the ceilings, muffled pacing, sharp voices slicing through hallways like broken glass. No laughter, no eye contact. I didn't need a calendar alert to know what was happening. Dennis had called an emergency meeting while I sat quietly in my cubicle downstairs, pretending to finish a performance report no one had asked for. The executive team scrambled. Phones rang nonstop. Legal locked themselves behind frosted glass. The PR team drafted 3 versions of a statement. None approved. And inside the boardroom? It was chaos. A colleague who owed me more than one quiet favor sent me a one-line message. Dennis is trying to pin it on legal. It's not going well. They were spinning hard. First, Dennis claimed Clause 47B was overlooked because legal had been understaffed. Then he argued Valerie was simply overreacting, that with the right language the deal could still be salvaged. And then, incredibly, he blamed me, said I had been too embedded in the project. That made me laugh. Quietly. Bitterly. I heard later that one of the board members finally shut it down. Her name was Catherine Lennox. Sharp, level, never one to raise her voice unnecessarily. But she had read the contract. Twice. She raised her hand and said slowly, "Let's stop pretending this was an oversight." I recall a closed-door meeting before signing where Dennis said Valerie Hart was becoming a threat to leadership optics, that her visibility needed to be reduced. No one responded. I wasn't in the room. But my silence filled it anyway. By 2:25 p.m., the final blow landed. An email from Valerie. Subject: Contract status body. Formal termination notice. It was cold. Final. Surgical. Due to unapproved personnel changes in violation of Clause 47B, Valerie considers the agreement null and void. All obligations are dissolved. It wasn't just sent to Northwind's leadership. They CC'd the investors group, legal, public relations, and every board member. The private inbox of every board member. The message was clear. That night, I stayed late. Not to finish work, but to watch it fall apart. Dennis's door remained firmly closed. Aaron's office lights never came on. From my cubicle, I could hear the hallway clock ticking louder than usual. 3 executives slipped out of the building without their jackets. One of them looked like he'd been crying. Someone from accounting paused near my desk. "You okay?" she asked, awkward but genuine. I nodded. "Fine." And I meant it. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel erased anymore. I didn't feel like a ghost at the edge of the empire I helped build. I had written that clause. I had safeguarded the deal. They had ignored me. And now they were watching the foundation crack beneath them. In the end, there was no statement. No narrative spin. Just silence. And the slow unraveling they couldn't control. And I stayed right there. Calm. Uninvited. Still standing. It came the next morning, at 9:15 a.m. as I was refilling my coffee. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. Manhattan area code. I almost let it ring. I was tired of the meetings, of the silence, of being underestimated. But something told me to answer. "Valerie Hart," a smooth voice said. "Speaking," I replied. "This is Jonah Patel from Polaris Dynamics. We connected a few months ago. I believe the timing wasn't quite right then." I paused, letting his words settle. "I remember." "Well," he continued, "I'm hoping the timing's right now. I'd like to revisit our offer, with upgrades." I walked slowly back to my desk, the paper cup warm in my hand, already forgotten. Jonah didn't waste time. Double the base salary, equity stake, remote work options, or relocation assistance if I preferred. and something more. A full, dedicated floor at Polaris's new DC headquarters, 3 blocks from Northwind. And one more thing, he said, voice softening. This offer wasn't entirely our idea. We were encouraged to reach back out, Jonah said. By who? I asked, my voice steady. There was a pause. Then, by Mikhail Berengar. He called you a non-negotiable asset. He said the deal unraveled because you weren't involved, and he doesn't want the next one unless you are. For a moment, I didn't respond. I leaned back in the same creaky chair Northwind had downgraded me to. My eyes drifted toward the scuffed corner of the cubicle wall, the one I used to tape recognition emails to, back when I believed they meant something. I remembered what it felt like to be erased, to be reduced to silence, to watch your initials disappear while someone else's took the credit. But now? I wasn't begging. I wasn't pitching. I was being invited. I appreciate the offer, I said carefully. But before we talk numbers again, I have one condition. Of course, Jonah replied without hesitation. What do you need? I choose my team. I approve every hire under my division, especially for post-deal integration. No exceptions. Another pause. Briefer this time. Done, he said. Anything else? Yes, I said. One more thing. I opened the desk drawer and pulled out the manila folder I had sealed shut since Munich. Inside was the letter, Mikhail's handwritten note, the one he slid under my hotel room door after that quiet dinner. I reread it slowly. My heart didn't race this time. I don't just want to oversee deals, I said. I want full life cycle authority, from negotiation to implementation, through renewal. You'll have it, Jonah said. No hesitation, no caveats. By the time I hung up, I hadn't said yes, but I hadn't said no either. I placed my phone face down on the desk and looked out the window. A flock of birds crossed the Seattle skyline, gliding just above the mirrored tower of Northwind Aerotech, the same building that had once boxed me in. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about restoration, about becoming the name they couldn't move forward without. And this time, I wasn't asking for permission. This time, I was the one making the call. It felt surreal. Sitting in a boardroom that overlooked Midtown Manhattan. Morning sunlight sliced through the tall windows, casting sharp lines across a polished walnut conference table. Leather folders were lined up perfectly. The same contract, the same jets, the same billion-dollar numbers. But this time, I wasn't just in the room. I was leading it. The pen in my hand felt heavier than any I'd held before. Not because it was ornate, but because this wasn't just a signature. It was a declaration. Everything had shifted. Ready when you are, Jonah said, sliding the final agreement across to me. I looked down at the cover sheet. Total contract value, 1.25 billion client. Valara Aerospace Vendor, Polaris Dynamics. Oversight, Executive, Valerie Hart. My name wasn't just on the signature line. It was built into the very structure of the contract. Valara had made it clear in their final terms. All post-deal operations, logistics, compliance, client reporting, must be overseen directly by Valerie Hart. No substitutions permitted. They weren't taking chances anymore, and neither was I. When I signed, I didn't just close a deal. I reclaimed my place, not within Northwind, but beyond it. I had walked out of their building in silence. I had endured their betrayal. I had watched them hand my legacy to someone else, and now I was signing the future without them. At 10:30 a.m., the press release went live, a full-color spread on Polaris Dynamics' homepage. Within minutes, Bloomberg and Reuters picked it up. Polaris secures historic jet deal with Valara. Former Northwind executive to lead global strategy. I didn't check Northwind's reaction. I didn't need to. But someone still inside texted me. Aaron saw it on LinkedIn. froze mid-sentence during a leadership huddle. Dennis read it 30 minutes later. Alone in his office. Neither of them had known. No memo, no whisper. Just a public reveal they couldn't rewrite. No call, no message. Not even a polite congratulations. But I didn't want it. Not anymore. Because in that moment, I didn't need an apology. I had the proof. On paper, in ink, in headlines. And the only thing more satisfying than being acknowledged was knowing they had been replaced in silence by the very person they erased, me. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime. I stepped onto the top floor of Polaris Dynamics' new DC headquarters. Marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows, subtle track lighting guiding the path forward. I reached into my blazer pocket and pulled out my new business card. Valerie Hart, Chief Global Officer, Polaris Dynamics. 3 months ago, I had been erased from a glass door. Now my name was engraved in the strategy guiding a global industry. As I walked toward the boardroom, I passed a sleek, glass-walled lounge. A muted news broadcast flickered across a mounted screen. I didn't stop. But I caught the headline scrolling across the ticker. Northwind announces 200 job cuts amid Valara contract fallout. CEO Dennis Cole resigns. I didn't feel joy. Not exactly. I felt release. They had tried to shrink me, reduce my presence to silence and memory. And now their empire was folding in on itself, like a paper crane soaked in water. The same people who cast me aside had gambled on my silence. But silence wasn't weakness. It was strategy. My phone buzzed once in my hand. A text. From Aaron. Can we talk? I think I made a mistake. I stared at it for a long second, then locked the screen and slid the phone into my bag. No reply. No explanation. There was nothing left to say. I pushed open the boardroom door and entered a room full of waiting executives. The energy shifted. In my hand was a new deal, $3.1 billion, a global supply and service agreement. And just like before, one clause written in plain language. All operations must remain under the direct oversight of Valerie Hart. As I took my seat at the head of the table, I wasn't thinking about revenge. I was thinking about legacy, the kind that echoes quietly in rooms where your name carries weight no title ever could. If you felt this story in your gut, if you've ever been cast aside, underestimated, or replaced by someone who didn't carry half the weight you did, I want to hear from you. Tell me where you're watching from. Share your moment, the one where you realized they thought you were expendable. Because you're not. None of us are. I didn't rise by shouting. I didn't strike back in rage. I waited. I prepared. I turned silence into strength. And when the time came, I signed the future they thought I couldn't touch. If you're in your own storm right now, boxed in, overlooked, holding back tears in some forgotten office, I see you. I've been you. And I want you to remember this. You don't have to scream to be powerful. You don't have to fight dirty to win. You just have to know your worth and build something so solid, no one can take it without your name holding it up. Leave a comment for me below. Share your truth. And if you believe that quiet power can still reshape the world, hit that like button and subscribe. Someone out there needs this story. Let's remind them they matter.